Hi everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be connecting together everything we've learned in the previous AWS tutorial videos and make a static website calling our API gateway, which then calls our Lambda functions, which finally will write or read from our DynamoDB. And I know it sounds like a lot, but it isn't, because we've already learned everything we needed to from our previous videos. So what I have here is what our final project is going to be. So this is a form that we can fill out, and when we submit it, it writes the message and the name and email to our DynamoDB. We already made the message table, and here on load, it loads all our messages from our DynamoDB. So let's first look at what we need to do to finish up the read message portion of our Lambda function so that we can call it from AWS API Gateway. So let's go to our AWS console. So I am on my AWS management console. Let's look at our Lambda functions. We have two Lambda functions. We have our write message and our read message. So let's go into our read message. And this is the code to read 10 messages from our DynamoDB. And we've already filled this completely out. And the most important thing that I want to make sure that you guys have is your access control allow origins all. This is important because this is enabling cores on our website. So we actually do not need to make any changes to our read message Lambda function. We just need to make the API call that will perform the get. So go back to your AWS management console. Let's open a new tab. And let's go to our API gateway. So if you were following along in our first video, we made a new API gateway called AWS Tutorial API. If you don't have this, you can create an API. You want to build it as a REST protocol, make your endpoint type regional. And if you're concerned about not doing it correctly, you can go back to my previous video. Otherwise, let's click into our AWS Tutorial API. I have deleted everything from my AWS Tutorial API, and I'm going to make a new resource. So under Actions, we're going to create a resource, and this is going to be called Message. So I'm grouping my resources together so that if I make any additional API calls that I want to have part of this API gateway, I can make a new resource for that. So this is my message resources. And if I chose to have a user and a user database, then I would make a user resource. So I'm going to create the resource. And we are making our get operation. So we're going to make a new method, choose get, little checkbox, and the integration type is a Lambda function. So let's type in our Lambda function. This is read message and click save. So we are now going to be giving API Gateway permission to invoke our Lambda function. So here it is, it's been created. If we click test, we don't have any bodies or query strings that we need. I'm going to click test, and we get back our messages. And I have 4 messages in my message table that all say hello from Lambda. So this has created the resource, but we aren't able to call it yet. We need to deploy this to production. But before we deploy it to production, we need to enable cores on our get message. If you don't do this, when you call the API from your static website, if they're at different subdomains, which most likely they will be, you will get a cores error. So we choose action, enable cores, keep everything as default, and let's click enable cores, and it's going to create an options for this. And we're going to have to do this again when we do our post call or writing the message to DynamoDB. So yes, replace existing values. Now you see options shows up here. So now what we want to do is deploy this API. So we're going to go deploy API, and we're going to deploy it to our stage prod. This already exists because we created the prod stage in our last tutorial. But if you don't have this, you can just click new stage and write the stage name. So here we are. This is our API deployed to prod, and that is our URL. Specifically, when you are making calls to your message API, you want to invoke the URL here. Invoke URL, that's our crazy URL name, prod, and then it's message. So this is important. This is the resource. So we're getting the message. If we go back to our test HTML that I have, this test form, and I refresh, we get our messages from our DynamoDB. This is all we've had to do to make our messages read from DynamoDB. Let's peek a little bit into the JavaScript code that does this. So this is my get message call, which fetches this is the prod URL. The method is get, and from the get I get a response, and I make sure that it's JSON. Then from that response, I go through each element in the response body, and I'm adding it to an element which is called messages, and I'm adding each message and just making it a separate paragraph. And the message ID is down here. So this is just, the JavaScript is just adding this HTML code. And that's what makes our hello from Lambda, hello from Lambda. And there's 4 because this is an array. So our more trickier call now is going to be submitting messages. So we want to now capture a message, because if you remember, our write message function for our Lambda function did not capture any elements from our event. So now we need to capture what's coming in from our event. So let's go back to our AWS console and go to our Lambda. Going back to our Lambda, I'm going to go to our functions, and I'm going to our write message. So we are in our write message Lambda function. Let's go down to our index.js. So this is the old write message that we had. So what we want to do is capture the body that is coming in. So what we're going to be using is our event. So what we're going to be looking at is the event parameter. So I'm going to have our JSON body look a little bit like this. So this is what the body of our JSON post message will be. So it's going to have name and then the value for name, email, the value for email, and message with the value from message. So in order to write that all to the DynamoDB, we need to make sure that all exists. So the first thing we're going to do here is write an if statement. If event.name and event.email and event.message. And this is saying if these all exist, we're going to move forward. This is how in JavaScript we can just check if something's undefined or not. So if event name, email, or message is missing from our post body, we don't even want to try to write to DynamoDB. Adding a bracket down here, and I'm going to indent. And if this doesn't match the response that we want to return back an error. And the error that we're going to respond back with is a 400 HTML code. That means that it's a bad request. So I'm going to copy this callback. Paste it here. Status code is 400. I'm going to say bad requests. So what if it's a good request? Let's modify our create message to take in the event parameter. I'm going to add event. We're going to change our create message function to have event. So now what we're going to do is update our parameters so that we have the name and email also being captured. So name is event.name. Email is event.email. And our message should be the event.message. This is all we need to do for our write message Lambda function. Let's save this and then now test with a new configuration and see that get written to DynamoDB. So I'm going to click save. I'm going to configure my tests and we're going to make a new test. So creating a new test, I'm going to call this test body. And our first element is our name. We'll call this test, email, test@email.com, and our message will be hello from Lambda, so that we know that this is being written from our Lambda message. So hello from Lambda. Let's create this test and test. So we got back our status code 201 that we've written saying everything worked. Let's look at our DynamoDB and see that if it got written there. Go to our new tab, go to DynamoDB, go to your message table, and there is our hello from Lambda that got written. So it works, yay! Let's now add this call to our API gateway. So let's go to our API gateway, go back to our resources, click our message resource, and we're going to add another method. So create method, and this is going to be a post. It's a Lambda function as well, and this is going to be write message. Click save. So now we're giving permission for our API gateway to invoke this Lambda function. So we're going to say yes. And let's test our post call from here. We're going to click test, and this takes in a request body. So remember, we said that if there were no elements in our body, we were going to throw an exception. We're going to throw 400. So let's see if that works. I'm going to click test. There's our 400 bad requests. Now let's make a good request. So this would be name is test, email is test@email.com, and our message is hello from API gateway. Let's click test. There we go. Let's see if it got written to our DynamoDB. So going back over here, I'm going to refresh this. There it is. Hello from API gateway. But we're not done yet, right? We've added this to our resources, but we haven't enabled cores for this post, nor have we deployed this. So let's first enable cores. So now cores is being updated. So now our cores has been updated so that our post message can be accessed. And now deploy. Choosing our prod stage. So now if we expand, we see that we have our messages and we have a post and a get within our prod stage. Let's go back to the form.html. So now we can run the form HTML code. So this can be test. You see all the final exams and things that I have to do. So test name, test@email.com, and then hello from our static website. and hit submit. So you can see here, this is my network tab with the dev tools open. We are posting to our message. This is the body that we are sending over, and we're getting back a 201. Let's see if it's in our DynamoDB. Refresh our table. There's hello from our static website. So let's look a little bit at the JavaScript code on our static website. This is the submit message. We are getting each document within our form, their values. So we're getting what's in the name input, in the email input, and the message input, and storing those as variables. And then I'm stringifying the object that's being created and sending that as our JSON message. When we get a successful response back, I'm adding the message to our document, to our messages, just like I added the other responses for the get. The reason I'm not calling the get messages down here is I don't want us to do too many unnecessary calls to our Lambda function. So keep that in mind when you're developing your websites, is where you can save yourself from making that extra call to API gateway and instead use some known information or caching. That's a better idea. It saves you money. So this is just all vanilla JavaScript because I don't want you guys having to worry about installing different frameworks. Now you can do all this still with any type of framework out there. So you can do this with React or Angular or Electron or whatever cool new toy it is going on. All right. So congratulations, guys. We've put everything together and you now know how to work from a static website all the way to reading or writing from a DynamoDB. See you next time on another AWS tutorial.